My name is Raguet-Schofield. I work for Wolfram, and I am giving a talk this afternoon called Mobile CDF Deployment. And by mobile, what I mean right now is iOS, iPads, and iPhones. We have done a fair amount of work on Android support for all the stuff that I'm going to be showing today, but it's quite a ways behind where our iOS developments are, so I'm not going to be showing anything there. So, if you have been to this conference the last several years, I have given a talk at this conference with a similar title. So, I've given this talk a few times. What's different this year from the previous years? So, in the previous years when I gave this talk, I was showing technology that we had been working on that didn't necessarily have a product to go along with it. This year, I'm only going to be showing products. So there's three different things that we're going to look at. One of them has already shipped, and two of them will be shipping very soon. So I'm fairly confident that next year at this conference, I won't be giving the exact same talk, and that makes me feel a lot better. So you can now and very soon deploy your CDF content to mobile devices using either Wolfram's apps or your own app, and I'm going to explain how to do that. So the first thing I'm going to mention is Wolfram Cloud, and I'm not going to go too far into Wolfram Cloud because there is a separate talk that is dedicated solely to Wolfram Cloud at later this afternoon. I'll just highlight a few interesting things about it. So Wolfram Cloud is available now for iOS. You can go to the App Store and you can get it. You can download it for free. You can log in using your Wolfram Cloud account. All your documents will be there, and you can open them, view them. You can even edit them. So that's one of the neat things Wolfram Cloud app has going for it. You can create and edit documents. There are some things about using the cloud which are actually advantageous when you're talking about interacting with a mobile device. So if you're doing computations that require a lot of CPU or a lot of RAM, doing it in the cloud is probably better. And if you don't have the CPU constantly spinning on your computations, the battery life on your mobile device will last longer in those cases. And it has a very small download size, since it's basically just a really thin client that calls out to the cloud to do a lot of the heavy lifting. So it does have a few limitations that I'll just briefly mention. It does require a network connection, since it relies solely on the cloud for all the document viewing and computation support. And the interactivity is a little bit limited in that, for example, if you're doing a manipulate or rotating a 3D graphic, those sorts of things do need to communicate to the server over the network, and that takes a little bit of time. So it's not quite as a smooth experience as it would be if it was all running locally on your device. So if you want to learn more about Wolfram Cloud, there's a talk at 4:30 today that my colleague Nick will be giving. If you haven't met Nick, he is sort of grayish and not well defined. Next is Wolfram Player. This is an app that there was a lot of back and forth about, and we received a lot of feedback from our users. Our users said, we want a Wolfram Player app for iOS, and we have decided that we are going to build that. We have been working very hard on it, and it will be released soon. We hope to release it by the end of this year. So definitely in time for next year's tech conference. So this is an app that we plan to make available for free, just as the Wolfram Player apps are free on desktop systems. And you will be able to use it to view CDF documents. If you have static content, like what I'm looking at now, you can just view that in the app for free. If you have enterprise CDF documents that were created from your, actually don't know exactly how that works, but if you have enterprise CDF, you know what that means. And you can create CDF documents that you can distribute, and people will be able to use the free Wolfram Player app to do interactive things with those documents. So if you have dynamic content, you have manipulates, you should be able to do those for free with the Wolfram Player app. And then we're going to have an optional in-app purchase for a reasonable price to enable full dynamic interactivity for arbitrary CDF documents. So stuff that's not enterprise CDF, maybe stuff that you just create on your desktop machine and you want to carry it around with you in your pocket or in your backpack. That will just be an optional in-app purchase to get dynamic interactivity for those documents. So Wolfram Player is a native app. So it has a user interface and user experience that's appropriate for the platform, whether that be iOS soon or Android a little bit further off. It has a Wolfram engine embedded inside of the app, so all the computations are done locally, and that allows for a much better interactive experience. Wolfram Player supports all the CDF content you would expect. We have nice typesetting, and this is all, we can zoom into this and it still looks really nice. These aren't bitmaps. We have 2D graphics. We have 3D graphics, including transparency, and these are live. You can rotate them. I'm just touching this with my finger and kind of spinning it around here. And one of the neat things that we've done on iOS is that we allow tossing gestures, so I can take this and spin it really fast and just let it go, and it will kind of spin around for a little while. Dynamic, we have controls and everything that has dynamic, or all of your the content that uses dynamic will update appropriately when these dynamic values change. Manipulate, and this is something that we had to do a little bit differently than what we do on desktop systems. As I'm sure most of you are familiar, when you have a manipulate command in a desktop version of Mathematica, by default, you get a bunch of controls right above your content, and you can use your mouse to interact with those controls. If we place those above the content on a touchscreen device, your hand is going to be blocking the content that you're trying to look at. So what we do here, by default, and there's ways to override this if you really want to, we tap on it to activate it, and we slide up some controls from the bottom of the screen. This one just has a single slider. And we can interact with the slider down here without blocking the view of the content that we're working with. And then when you're done, we can just tap away and the controls slide off screen. So this version of Wolfram Player is built for touch screens. So on a desktop system, we have functions like mouse position, which don't make a lot of sense on an iPad that I'm using here. So we have a new function called touch position that allows you to do the same sorts of things as you can with mouse position on a desktop. But it's a little bit more flexible. Since right now I'm not touching the screen, there's no touches, it just returns an empty list. And this is the thing with the green background here. So if I put a finger down, I get a point. If I put 2 fingers down, 2 points. And I can keep loading this up with a bunch of fingers here. And this works even while I'm scrolling the document, it's still working. So in addition to touch position, we have a function called gesture handler, which is very similar to what event handler does on desktop Mathematica. One of the gestures we support is a drag gesture, so I just have a simple example here where I turned off, I disabled 3D rotation, and I'm using this drag gesture to adjust the radius of the sphere here. So you can do some neat interactive things using gesture handler. And if you have certain types of controls, like a vertical slider, for example. If we pop up a vertical slider from the bottom of the screen, it's going to cover half the screen. So we have a new option to manipulate called touchscreen control placement for cases like this, where you can move the controls over to the right side of the screen, or the left, or the top, or the bottom. You can specify where you want the controls. And so I have my vertical slider over on the right here, where it's not taking up as much space as it would at the bottom. Okay, so what are some of the limitations we encounter when deploying CDF to iOS? So we have a relatively large download size. This is only going to affect you once, probably, but it's a few hundred megabytes. It does include the full Wolfram engine, and there's really not any way to get around that. So you're not going to be able to download it over a cellular connection, but download it over Wi-Fi and just keep it on your device and you should be good. So this is a player app, so the documents are read-only. This app doesn't allow editing documents. There's a handful of features which are incomplete and will be incomplete for the for the near future. Things like event handler. We're just not going to support a lot of the types of events you get on a desktop system. Tab view isn't implemented. There's certain cases of locator that aren't implemented. There's limitations with input field. It doesn't support arbitrary 2D typeset content. It's just linear text input for input field. JLink, which requires a Java runtime, is not available on iOS, so we have no JLink support. And other features which are built on top of JLink, things like database link, these are not going to be possible due to the lack of JLink. There's some performance considerations to take into account. The older iOS devices in particular are have very small amount of RAM, so it's kind of a big deal just to get a Wolfram engine running at all with such a small amount of RAM. And whatever computations you do on top of that, it's just going to add to the need for memory. So we try to handle low memory situations gracefully. Sometimes there's not a lot we can do. iOS will just sometimes abruptly kill the app if it's using too much memory, but we try to avoid that whenever we can. The newer devices have a little bit more RAM, so it's less of an issue with an iPad Air or an iPad Air 2. The CPU is, fairly slow by the standards of desktops and laptops that we're used to working with. I think I mentioned a few years ago when I gave this talk that the mobile performance is about 5 years behind where desktops and laptops were. At this point, it's actually slightly less. They're probably closer to 3 to 4 years behind. I got a new iPhone 6s a few weeks ago, and I ran benchmarks on it, and it's faster than my MacBook Air from 2012. So they're catching up, which is interesting. Other limitations, the Wolfram engine cannot currently be restarted like you can in a desktop version of Mathematica. You can go to the menu and quit kernel. We can't do that, so if for some reason that becomes necessary, you'll have to quit the entire app and then start it up again. So next, I'm going to talk about something called CDF Kit. And CDF Kit is an SDK that we are making for iOS. CDF Kit is actually the core of the Wolfram Player app. So if we look at what's on the screen right now, the dark bar across the top, that's the CDF Player app, and then everything else on screen, that's CDF Kit. And so this is something that we use internally for our apps, and this is something that we are going to be making available to partners to build custom apps with as well. We already have a few partners who are testing it at the moment, and probably around the time when we release the Player app, we will start making this available more widely to more partners. So if you are interested in building a custom app, come see us, and we'll see if we can work something out. So clients can embed CDF Kit into their iOS apps, and that will allow you to display CDF content, including interactive things like 3D graphics, dynamic, manipulate. You can also use it to perform evaluations using Wolfram language expressions. So even if you're not necessarily displaying CDF content, but you have a chunk of Wolfram language code that you just want to evaluate, you can do that even if you're not displaying anything. So there's a concise interface. It's fairly small, fairly easy to wrap your head around, that you can call from your Objective-C or Swift app on iOS. So this isn't a 100% solution. You will need to write a little bit of code in Objective-C or Swift in order to take advantage of the CDF Kit SDK. So there's several different types of applications that this will enable. So in this application, the CDF content is basically taking over the entire screen. And we have more content than displays in one screen full, so it scrolls. That's one thing that we can do. You can also have a completely custom interface that just has a tiny rectangle somewhere on the screen that has CDF content inside of it. So what we're looking at here, this is the Wolfram Player app that we're going to be releasing soon. And it is built using CDF Kit. We also have, in development, we are working on a version of the Wolfram Alpha app that uses CDF Kit. And I don't know if and when that's going to be available, but hopefully we'll have something like that. And I'll just give you a brief demonstration of how that works. So this is my special version of the Wolfram Alpha app, and I have normal Wolfram Alpha output with this little button here that I'm just going to tap on. And now what was once static Wolfram Alpha output is now interactive. And while I'm here, I'm just going to briefly show the Wolfram Cloud app in case you're not familiar with that. These are my cloud documents, and I have the same document that we were looking at in the Wolfram Player app. And this takes a couple seconds to open up here. But this is all running in the cloud. This is a very small app. And there are features that I can use to edit this document, which you'll see in Nick's talk if you go to that. So back in Wolfram Player, I will just show you real quick. This was a file that was stored locally on my iPad, so I didn't need any network connectivity to use that. But we can also access files stored in the Wolfram Cloud. And so this is that same list of files that we just looked at in the Wolfram Cloud app, but it's in Wolfram Player. And I can open this same document, and everything just works as you would expect.